What is this? Is this something that debunks the narrative? Is this something that will completely dismantle everything that Review Tech USA and those idiots on Twitter are trying to tell people a couple of weeks ago? Like, I thought third-party games weren't selling well on Nintendo Switch 2. And here we have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, the digital version from Activision, top of the charts. It is outselling Mario Kart World this week. Now, we'll see if that, how long it stays up there, but the fact that it was able to do this to begin with, really demonstrates, the strength of the Switch 2, how this console is selling really well, how people are really buying games for it, how it's, this extraordinarily, successful thing. And meanwhile, the narrative, the gigantic cope that people had that third-party games don't sell on this platform is being debunked time and time again, right? This week, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, Fantasy Life, Cyberpunk, Split Fiction, Street Fighter 6, Hogwarts Legacy, Bravely Default. At this point, there's more third-party games on this list than first-party ones. That's the really telling thing about this, is that people really thought that Mario Kart World would stay on top of the charts no matter what because it was the only relevant game on the platform. And yet, a brand new game, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, is topping the charts. Now, I do really think there's a couple things we really need to break down about this because this narrative was always a cope right from the get-go. But one of the things I keep seeing, in regard to this is this idea that people aren't going to want to play third-party games on Switch 2 because they are better on Xbox, PlayStation, or PC, and to that, I just kind of had to shake my head and laugh because that isn't true. That never has been true. That never will be true. And, the entire concept is just fundamentally flawed and is just, falling apart at the seams, right? Everyone I know is perfectly happy with the third-party games they buy on Switch 2. Right? The simple fact of the matter is everything that comes out on Switch 2 runs well, plays well, has all the features of the other versions, and is just overall the best version of the game because of the portability, because it's on a real console, because they don't have to worry about Xbox or PlayStation or their nonsense. Nintendo is just the dominant force in gaming right now. And currently, there's this huge, gigantic cope to kind of deny that, we've been seeing this for a long time. People tend to not really talk about major Nintendo success stories in general when it comes to this kind of thing, but it really does need to be emphasized, at this point, how this seems to be a major cultural shift. It's becoming more and more apparent that third-party games are finding success on Nintendo platforms, and the traditional cope that nobody on Nintendo plays anything other than the Nintendo games has completely fallen apart and is pretty transparently not true, even by looking at this list. And I think a really good example of that is Yakuza Zero. So we looked at the list, at the bestsellers list last week as well, right? We went through all the lists, and I kind of noted that some of the games I really enjoy weren't on there. Hitman: World of Assassinations wasn't on there. And Yakuza Zero wasn't. And I've been checking the list every week, and I can tell you that Yakuza Zero has never actually cracked the bestsellers list. Yakuza Zero has cracked the bestsellers list on Nintendo Switch 2 this week. In spite of the $50 price tag, in spite of some controversial story changes and some things that people didn't like about this version, it has cracked the top 15. And I do think a reason for that is because it was featured on the front page. So, again, the entire idea that people had that, gamers weren't going to, buy third-party games, that they weren't going to do well, that they would get them on different platforms. If you're shopping on, for games on Switch 2, you're not necessarily going to look on, Xbox One or whatever and pay less money for an inferior version of the game. Yakuza Zero on Switch does have additional content. They did add more stuff to it. So there is a reason to buy this version over the other. So I find it very interesting how, games like that, like Hogwarts Legacy, like Rido, like Street Fighter 6, like how all of these third-party games that like everyone pretended did not exist have been doing extraordinarily well. And now, this week, Tony Hawk Pro Skaters 3 and 4, a new game that's coming to everything on multi-plat, is topping the bestsellers charts. Like this is it, like that's it. Done and dusted. The entire cope and sieve that Nintendo Switch 2 games weren't selling well, or specifically that third-party games weren't selling well, is completely and utterly kaput. Like, there is just no coming back from this. There is no recovery. Like, before Bonanza even came out, before Shadow Labyrinth, before, Tony Hawk is even released, actually. It doesn't come out until the end of the week, right? Before all of that, it can't be more obvious that Nintendo Switch 2 has become extraordinarily successful. And we're still in that early phase where the community and like the Pretendos and like the gaming journos are desperately trying to downplay it, like however they can. And to me, it's just getting kind of sad, honestly. A simple look at the bestsellers chart should have instantly debunked any notion that people have had about third-party games not selling well, and yet they couldn't do the slightest bit of research. They couldn't go to the store and see all these sold-out physical copies of games. They couldn't go to the bestsellers list and look. They couldn't look at like Amazon sellers list. Like, they just came up, invented out of whole cloth. Well, some guy on Twitter said some third-party dev said that like their games did poorer than expected. Like, what game? Like, again, that's kind of like my that was kind of my take on it. Because like, what game? Because like, was it some like indie game that nobody cared about? Like, from where I'm sitting, like everything on the console seems to be doing very, very well. So. And you have a lot of variety in like the bestsellers as well. You have Tony Hawk, sports game. You have Fantasy Life Sim, Cyberpunk, Slot. You have Split Fiction. I don't even know. Like Street Fighter 6 fighting game. Hogwarts Legacy, like Sim. RPG racing. Beat 'em up RPG. Like there's just so much variety in the bestsellers list. Like, I'm sure that even the games that are in like the top 50 are doing well. Like that's kind of my takeaway from this. Looking at like the current state of gaming and everything that's happening right now, like clearly third-party games are selling well. So where exactly were people coming from with this idea that the game wasn't doing well, or that like that Switch games were failing? Like, like again, I have to come away with this conclusion that the people saying this like don't own the console, they don't play the console, they're not buying games on the console, because like anybody who is like swamped with games to play. I can tell you from experience, I've spent like the past month like playing a wide range of titles. Fantasy Life 2, Hitman, Street Fighter 6. I started Rune Factory last night. Like there's just so many games on the console. It's like you don't need dozens and dozens of games right out of the gate. Like I was happy with 5. I bought 5, and even that kind of seemed excessive. So, like again, the Switch 2 has had a successful launch. I don't know what to tell you. Every single cope that people threw out there, in regards to like Mario Kart World being overpriced, or Cyberpunk being a late port, or like, I don't know, Dragon Drive being woke, Welcome Tour, all this slop that people tried to like throw on the Nintendo Switch 2, all of it has completely fallen apart. And I think by the time that the next Nintendo Direct comes out, it's going to be more and more apparent just how dominant Nintendo Switch 2 is in the world of gaming.